With stain, this would open up, but you would still have color. But when you see it separating and opening, if there's a scratch or a nick and you see that really light tone, that means it's to tone finish. You'll see on a lot of new furniture they do this now, and it's really cutting a corner in manufacturing. It helps to speed up the process. They could just skip the whole staining step and just go right into the toning. And the only problem with that, though, is you'll notice on some of your furniture at home, if you nick it, suddenly you have this huge white, eyesore where you chip the color right off, and now you're down to the raw wood. With a stained or dyed finish, you might have some wood color or some color still in the wood, which would be help to mask it. But you can see how nice and clean this came out now. And there's still some sticky residue on that, so we're gonna go over this again and clean this up at the end. But I'm gonna go ahead and do the rest of the body, and we'll get it all cleaned up. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you, maybe come back to the front side here. I'm gonna go around and do the rest of it, but now this is starting to dry. It might look a little bit sort of oily as it's drying, I would say is the best term. It's very similar to if you wipe something down with mineral spirits or paint thinner. So you have to let it dry to get the real visual of how it looks raw. But this area, because we just wiped it down with a dirty cloth, I'm sure that there's probably still some residue here that we want to get off. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to soak this cloth here, and I'm going to use this like an after wipe, which we are working on some ideas for sort of an after wash, after wipe. And by the time you're viewing this, maybe we already have it, but that's something we are working on. But I'm going to go over it and just give it a final wash. And this is going to kind of grab that last bit of grime. See that color? That's what you want to see. It's got that. And again, the more time you spend just getting it nice and clean, you're going to avoid having to have to do a lot of sanding. You're still going to have to sand. I don't want to promise that there's like no sanding involved. Some people think that maybe if they strip it clean enough that they could just totally skip the sanding phase. I would recommend you don't do that, but a light sanding is far better than grinding through the old finish and burning through the patina of the wood and all of that. And what's cool is if you happen to see any trouble spots or anything that you feel could use a little extra, like I feel like there's a little right here, you could just hit that and just eyeball it. If you need a little extra somewhere, just take the time to do it. But your goal is just to get down to that raw wood, get it nice and clean, and then enable yourself to just do a light sanding, maybe 220, something very light at the end, just to kind of clean up the wood instead of doing all of the lifting with sanding. I'm gonna take another, actually I'm gonna come over here and get a new piece. If I have it, I'll use this actually. I'm gonna use the sponge now. I'll show you that this can work. This is a good option for you too, is these sponges. I'm just gonna do this area and see if I can lighten that up at all. There's some spots where you just see that it's sort of clinging a little bit. So I'm just gonna hit those. Not a big deal. It's when you're not dealing with harsh chemicals, whoop, lost that paper towel. It's a windy day here in New England. Get another one. When you're not dealing with the harsh chemicals, it's nice because you could take the time and it's almost therapeutic. I know that sounds very weird to say that stripping furniture can be actually enjoyable, but I think it can be. If you have a product that you're not killing your brain cells using and you're not harming yourself or the environment or you're not in danger, yeah, just take the time and give it a really good, thorough cleaning. And then you have a beautiful area to work with. And that's pretty much what I would call done. I would let this dry for a little bit and see if I feel any clingy stickiness. And if there is, I would just maybe spot treat that with a little QCS on another clean cloth. But overall, as long as you see that it's still pulling off some color, you may want to go a little bit more and just kind of keep getting it down to where you see very little color coming off, and then call it done and move along to finishing the rest. But that's pretty much the gist of how you would do those flat surfaces. I'm going to finish off this whole piece now, and yeah, pretty straightforward. It's actually a lot of fun on a beautiful day like today, just standing outside, enjoying the weather, and just making this piece come back to life. It's very rewarding to see the change from what you start with to what you end up with. All right, guys, I just want to show you, we've been working on the side, so now I just want to put more of the QCS up here on this edge, and I'm going to try to preserve the interior as much as possible. One nice thing about the QCS is that it gives you a minute to like, if, for example, if you see that you're like kind of running in here a little bit, you can kind of catch it, and it's not as aggressive. I mean, it might take a little of the color off. It's tricky. I mean, I might actually even strip in here because there's inserts that set in here, so I might actually just do that interior edge. But still, it gives you a little bit of a slower cut through, where if you were using like a harsher chemical, a lot of times as soon as it touches the finish, it cuts through it, which is nice if you want it to work that fast. But it also prevents you from, like, if you make a little mistake, you're kind of in a little bit of a trouble, So I like that I can go along and kind of spot treat and be kind of careful on things like this edge. And if it happens to run in a little bit, I could sometimes wipe it and catch it before it even does anything. So I'm gonna let this work. See how I'm just sort of building up a little bit of a heavy coat on there? I did that on these 3 sides. I'm gonna come around here and do it over here as well. Just kind of control where it's going. I mean, masking it off and all that, you could try that, but a lot of times with a liquid, it'll just cut under the glue of the masking, and it really won't prevent you from having any benefit. It's better to see where it's running a little bit and wipe it than it is to mask it all off and then try to pull it back and realize it got under there anyway. So I'm gonna let that sit for just a few minutes, let that start to cut through a little as well. And these drips won't stain. That's one nice thing about the QCS is it has no water in it, and so you won't get watermarks, or it's not a harsh chemical, so you're not going to get chemical staining. This here, I could literally just wipe it, and you're not going to see like lines where other products might leave marks. So it's very forgiving, especially for you DIYers who are maybe early on in doing this. It's great because it's just it's safe and it's low risk versus some harsher chemicals where you might miss that it's dripping over the side and suddenly you see that there's stains that you can't get rid of. That's a bummer when you're trying to do a piece like this and you just make a little mistake, but QCS won't do that to you. So that's a real big benefit. While we're at it, I want to show you, we've done the other 2 sides. And you may wonder why I don't use a putty knife, and you can. You could use a putty knife. So I'm gonna just wet this side again a little bit, just to sort of reactivate it. You can see it's getting kind of molassesy and just really goopy looking. You can see the color sort of dripping down, and that's great. That means it's been working. I'm just gonna wet this whole side again, and